Here we are once again diving into the history of Tartaria. And in this series, we're going to be looking at their religion and if there's any parallels between the Empire of Tartaria and the Bible and perhaps the book of Revelation. So to kick things off here in episode 1, let's get started with this book called Purchase His Pilgrims in 5 books. The first containing the voyages by ancient kings, patriarchs, apostles, and philosophers and others to the more remote parts of the known world, inquiries into their languages and religions, and especially of the modern diversified professions of Christianity. Here on page 309, the history of Aten or Anthony the Armenian of Asia, and especially touching on the Tartars, of the kingdom of Cathay and the diverse and other provinces of Asia, and the first habitation of the Tartars, and of the Kangas or Chinggis in his beginnings. And this appears to be talking about Genghis Khan, who was born sometime around 1158. That date might be wrong. We're going to come back to that shortly. But where it speaks of the first habitation of the Tartars and of Kangas or Chinggis, his beginnings, this is the beginnings of Genghis Khan. And it's talking about the kingdom of Cathay, which is the greatest that is found in the world and is replenished with people and infinite riches, being situated on the shore of the ocean sea. This kingdom of Cathay is, of course, in the kingdom of Tartaria. Here's a map of a map of Tartaria. We will notice that the men on bows who travel on horse are wearing blue, red, and yellow. But if we look up here on the ocean shore, just south of Tindouf, we will see Cathay. And so this is a region in Tartaria that appears on this map south of Tindouf. This is a map of Christianity, and here's Tindouf, which there are many Christians. And that's interesting. There's a lot of Christians in Tindouf. Cathay should be just south of here. I don't see it on this map. But very interesting that we find many Christians in Tindouf, because Tindouf is the same area right up here where we find Arzareth. Now, Tindouf looks like it's maybe misplaced a bit on this map. It's down here in this case. But on almost all maps of Tartaria, you'll find Tindouf in this northeastern corner up here. And it's always on the ocean, just as described in the book. Tindouf up here in the same exact area where we find Arzareth. And Arzareth is the area for Esdras. And this is where the lost 10 tribes of Israel are driven out of Israel. They were brought to the other side of the Euphrates River, and they were led captive to another land. For they had deliberated among themselves, they had taken a counsel, and they would leave the multitude of peoples and go to an inner region where they had never, the race of men, had dwelt. That there also they would keep the law which they had not kept in their own land, and they entered through a narrow passage in the Euphrates River. For the Most High then made a miracle for them, where he held back the source of the river until they had passed over. So this is very similar to when Moses and the crossing of the Red Sea. Here God has also held back the river so that they can pass over, that they might proceed to the dry land. And it was a great way to go. A journey of a year and a half, and the region was called Arsaf, at the end of the world. And this is Arsaf, correctly called Arzareth, or another land, from Deuteronomy. And they have dwelt there until the last time, or they will dwell there until the last time, when they will come back again. And the Most High will again hold back the source of the river Euphrates, that they might pass over. So God's going to hold back the river so that they can return. From the Jewish encyclopedia, Arzareth, the name of the land beyond the great river, far from the habitation of man, where the 10 tribes will dwell, observing the laws of Moses until the time of the restoration. So that area of land is located in Tartaria right here. And the text here in Latin says the Arzareth. Here are the 10 tribes retreated and changed from the Tartar area to Scythia. And since then, they are called Goths or Gothans, confirming God's highest glory. And here lies the splendid kingdom of Cathay. So in Arzareth, where the 10 tribes went, is where the splendid kingdom of Cathay resides. And it says here about Argon that this is a Christian kingdom known to Prester John. So it appears that the lost 10 tribes of Israel are a Christian group of people, not necessarily following Judaism, but they're Christians. And specifically, when we look at a map of Christianity, this area of Tinduk, there's many Christians. And going on from there, some Christians, a lot of Christianity in Asia and Tartaria, but specifically focused around the area of Tinduk, where the lost 10 tribes of Israel are at. So a few things we know about Cathay is that it is the home of the 10 tribes of Israel because, according to 4 Esdras, the race of men had never dwelt there before. And the lost 10 tribes are the first ones to come into this area. And from there, we have Christianity spreading to the rest of Asia. So back to Purchas his pilgrims, when it's talking about the kingdom of Cathay and the greatest to be found in the world, this is a Tartarian kingdom, and it is the kingdom of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. In the kingdom of Cathay, there are many marvelous and monstrous things which I forbear to mention. The inhabitants of those parts are exceedingly wise, replenished with all kinds of skill and cunning, insomuch that they disdain the endeavors of all their nations in all kinds of art and science, saying that they only see with 2 eyes, but the Latins see only with 1 eye, and all other nations are blind. Interesting that the Tartarians say that they see with 2 eyes, and that everybody else only sees with 1 eye. I would assume this is a reference to the physical eye and the parietal eye inside of the brain, which is the pineal gland. But it seems the Tartarians are saying that they see with both of their eyes, of course, and the other people of the world only see with their physical eyes, that all other nations are blind. And the Tartarians seem to disagree with the other nations' sciences. And they think that they're, they disdain the endeavors of the other nations and their sciences. And they're exceedingly sharp-sighted in exercise of all bodily works and labors. Of this kingdom of Cathay, it is said that it is the beginning of the world because the head thereof is in the east, and there is not known any other nation to inhabit more easternly thereabouts. Once again, the location seems to be correct, as Tinduk and Cathay are basically as far east as you can go, of course, without crossing over the Bering Strait and going into America. In the kingdom of Tarsa and 3 provinces whose rulers are also called kings, the men of that country have always worshipped idols, yet there is an exception that 10 kindreds of those kings who are guiding of a star came to worship the nativity in Bethlehem, Judah, and there are yet found many great and noble among the Tartarians of that race, which hold firmly to the faith of Christ. So it sounds as though the kings, the 3 kings who followed the star to worship Jesus Christ when he was born in Bethlehem, are Tartarians, and that they still hold firmly to their faith in Christ. And he goes on to describe a lot of the areas around here. Of course, the kingdom of Tarsa, the kingdom of Turkestan, the kingdom of Korsamians, the kingdom of Cumania, and all the way down to India. And here is the land of Armenia and the kingdom of Georgia. And in the kingdom of Georgia is a marvelous, strange wonder or miracle, which I would not have reported or believed if I would have not seen it with my own eyes. But because I have personally been there and been made an eyewitness thereof, I can say that in those parts there is a province or country called Hansim. It's about 3 days' journey, and the whole extent is all covered over with such thick and palpable darkness that nobody can see anything therein. Neither do they dare go into their land, because they know that they won't be able to find their way out again. Those that inhabit near it affirm that they have often heard the sound of men's voice crying, of cocks crowing, and of the neighing of horses in the wood. And because of the course of the river and things they see coming down the river, it appears that there's certain signs that there are people inhabiting therein. Now, supposedly this is Georgia, which is right down here between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, very close to Turkey. And 3 days journey, of course, is not going to get you where there's to the North Pole where there's darkness. So it's definitely not talking about any type of North Pole or South Pole darkness. This is some kind of a supernatural darkness that's taken over apparently some area around here in Georgia. Revelation chapter 16 verse 10 says, "The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. People gnawed their tongues in agony and cursed God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, but they refused to repent of what they had done." So in Revelation, there is a supernatural darkness where people are gnawing their tongues in agony. And in the kingdom of Georgia, there is a supernatural darkness, a marvelous, strange wonder or miracle with palpable darkness, and you can't see anything therein. And there's the sound of men's voices crying. And to double check, in Revelations, it says that when he poured out his bowl, the throne of the beast and its kingdom was plunged into darkness. So just one throne or one kingdom was plunged into darkness. Seems to align with the one kingdom in Georgia that's having a supernatural darkness. In the country in which the Tartarians first inhabited lies beyond the great mountain Belgian Minton in the histories of Alexander. And they lived like a brutish people without learning or religion, feeding herds of beasts and going from place to place to seek pasture. And not being exercised in arms, they were despised by other nations. And in ancient time there were many nations which by common name were called Mogli. Probably this is where the Mongolians came from. Who upon their increase were divided into 7 principal sorts. And the first of the nation was called the Tartar. And from the name of the province where they first inhabited. And the second was Tangur. The third was Kunat. And the fourth, Talir. The fifth, Sonich. And the sixth, Monghi. And the seventh, Tibet. So the Tartarians are broken up into 7 different kingdoms. And according to Alexander, they are Gog and Magog. The book of Revelation is written from John to these 7 churches of Asia. Or you could say John to the 7 churches of Tartaria. So it's possible that the 7 churches of Asia, or the 7 churches of Tartaria, are in fact the 7 nations of the Tartarians. Now in Revelation chapter 20, it talks about the 1,000-year reign of Christ. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Now this Gog and Magog, according to Alexander, it says here that the country in which the Tartarians first inhabited lies beyond the great mountain Belgian mentioned in the histories of Alexander. Alexander says that these Tartarians are Gog and Magog. In this book, Disquisitions of the Antipapal Spirit, it speaks of the Tartars who did the most astounding things, but those people had been shut up in the mountains of Gog and Magog by Alexander the Great. And Gog and Magog, of course, is mentioned in the book of Revelation, and they remained there until the year 1202. And here we have one explanation of why the Tartarians have an owl on their flag, but we will also get a second story of that shortly. Alexander had placed large trumpets certain distances from each other on the mountains, and whenever the wind blew, it sent forth blasts of war, and for 10 centuries, I don't know if that number is correct, but these cunning Tartars continued to believe that Alexander was stationed behind them because the trumpets were blowing, and at last the owls built some nests in the mouths of the trumpets, and they were silent. So when the Tartars, summoning up their courage, they climbed up to the summit of the mountain, they saw the trumpets, which had, of course, the owl's nest in them, and they decided that they would leave their place of concealment and disperse themselves as conquerors into many countries, and from that time they've held the owl in great honor. But of this we are certain, that the whole legend of the trumpets on the hills of Gog and Magog are the effect of the wind upon them, together with the account of the owls who, closing the trumpet's mouth, delivered the Tartars from their causeless fears. And that's one story as to why the Tartars revere the owl. But we have a whole different story about why they have the owl on their flag here shortly. But looking into Alexander's account, Iskander, or Alexander's Dike, or the Dike of Gog and Magog, is the name of a vast rampart said to have been built by Alexander the Great to defend his dominions from the incursions of the wild northern tribes. The idea was probably derived from some confused account of the Great Wall of China. So this Great Wall supposedly built by Alexander to keep the Gog and Magog, or the lost 10 tribes, out of their, out of the country. It may be the Great Wall of China, which here is the Great Wall, of course, keeping the lost 10 tribes from coming further south to spread their Christianity, it seems like. And here we have Cathay, this large region of Cathay, of course, on the coast. And the Great Wall of China would continue on to the coast, and eventually the Great Wall of China is just the southern border of Cathay. So, it seems that maybe this Great Wall, supposedly the one that Alexander took credit for building, was built to keep the 10 tribes of Israel from spreading out into the world. The Red Jews, anti-Semitism in the apocalyptic age, the unclean peoples of Gog and Magog at the beginning of the Common Era. Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Alexander closed the iron gates at the mountain pass through which the Scyths, or Tartarians, might break into the civilized world. In another work, he identifies the Scyths or Tartarians with Magog. Fisher claims that the legend of Alexander's Gate, having been built to enclose Gog and Magog, was of Jewish origin and came from 1st century Alexandria, based on earlier Jewish stories of Alexander as a hero of Jewish history. So the Jews, of course, are the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, who were not lost. Those are, of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 2 who are not lost are the Jews, and the 10 who got lost became Tartarians. So the Israelites were the 12 sons of the biblical patriarch Jacob, and Jacob's 12 sons are the 12 tribes of Israel. 10 of those tribes are lost. 2 of them aren't. So the 10 who get lost are Reuben, Simon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Manasseh, and Ephraim. But the 2 who are not lost are Judah and Benjamin. So the tribes of Judah and Benjamin would go on to become the Jews. Of course, Judah, the Jews, and it seems as though the other 10 tribes would go on to become Christians. They were called Jews. After that, Judah and Benjamin, which for the unity of minds were, as it were, one tribe. And so the one tribe of Judah and Benjamin are called the Jews. The other 10 breaking off, and what became of those 10 tribes? The Jews acknowledged themselves to be ignorant. So the tribe of Judah and Benjamin claimed to be ignorant, but that's not true. Only some rabbis think them to be in Tartaria. The only reason which I have heard them allege for their opinion is because they often understand by Tartarians who come from there that there are many amongst them called by Hebrew names to this day. Now, these ones are practiced in Judaism, and these ones are practiced in Christianity. So it seems as though these guys came up with the story of Alexander trying to lock these guys out of basically being able to return to Jerusalem and return to Israel. So the legend of Alexander's Gate being built to enclose Gog and Magog was of Jewish origin. In other words, the Jews, the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, are calling the other 10 tribes Gog and Magog. At some time before the 12th century, when the story of Gog and Magog enclosed by Alexander was conflated with the Jewish legend of the 10 tribes, Alexander was credited with having enclosed Gog and Magog behind the gate he is said to have built in the Caucasus. The Alexander legend says that he came upon wild people and unclean people who ate human flesh and had other vile customs, and to keep them from destroying the rest of the world, Alexander drove them between two mountains and then asked God to push the two mountains together and imprison them. And this story found its way not only into later versions of the Alexander legend, but also into the Quran and into the influential Greek revelations, which date from the end of the 7th century. And that was translated into Latin, which was sent out into the West, and it became a standard of Christian, the Christian Bible of its time. So it seems as though perhaps the Jews, the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, are trying to come up with this story about Alexander to convince the rest of the world that the lost 10 tribes of Israel are Gog and Magog, the apocalyptic destroyers of Ezekiel and Revelation. And the story of the lost 10 tribes is based on the biblical account of the 10 tribes of Israel led in captivity by the king of Assyria. And the 4th book of Ezra relates in the exile lost 10 tribes and their future return to serve the Messiah on Mount Zion. They are beyond the Euphrates River, and the flow of which God stopped in order to let them cross. And when God wills it, he will stop the flow of the river once again and allow the 10 tribes to return. So switching back to Purchas his pilgrims, when it talks about the country of the Tartarians, and it lies beyond the great mountain of Belgium, mentioned in the histories of Alexander, that is the history of that and its connection to the book of Revelation, in that these Tartarians are, at least by Alexander or the Jews, are being called Gog and Magog from Revelation 20, who are released to deceive the nations after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And there are a lot of sevens in the book of Revelation. So interesting that these Tartarians are divided up into 7 different nations. And I'm wondering if those 7 nations are the 7 churches from the book of Revelation. And these 7 nations lived under subjection to their neighbors. So they didn't have a lot of war power, and their neighbors had subjection over them. But as it happened, a poor old man, being a smith, saw a vision in his sleep, namely a man armed in all white armor and mounted on a white horse, which, calling his name, said unto him, Changus, it is the will and pleasure of the immortal God that you be Lord and ruler over these nations of the Tartarians, and that you be delivered from the dominion of your neighbors, under which you have long remained. And you shall rule over your neighbors. And when Chinggis, hearing this word of God, he was replenished with exceeding joy, and made publicly known the vision which he had seen. But the rulers and commanders would not give credit to the vision, but they rather despised and mocked the old man. But the following night they themselves saw the same vision of the horse armed in white, who commanded them from the immortal God that they should be obedient to Chinggis and cause all to obey his command. Whereupon all the said chieftains and governors of the 7 nations of the Tartarians, calling the people together, made them yield obedience and reverence to Chinggis, and afterwards placing a chair for him in the midst and spreading a black felt carpet on the ground, and they set him thereon. And then the 7 chief rulers lifted him up, placed him on the throne, with great triumph and acclamation, calling him Khan, their first emperor, and doing him solemn reverence with bowing their knees as to their lord and governor. The first son is heir to the crown, and installed with their ceremonies, the chief of the 7 tribes, clothed in white, caused the prince to sit upon a black woolen cloth spread upon the ground, willing him to behold the sun and to fear the immortal God. Then they set a crown upon his head, and the great lords kiss his feet, swear loyalty, and honor him with the most rich presents. Okay, so just a real quick summary here. He has a vision of a white horse, and he says, Chinggis, you're going to be lord and ruler over all the nations of the Tartarians. They put a crown upon his head, and they place him on a throne in the midst of them, and they call him Khan, their first emperor, and bowing their knees to him as their lord and governor. Revelation chapter 6, I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, Come, and I looked, and before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. I wonder if this Khan, who was given a crown, who's seen a vision of a white horse, is going to be riding on a horse and holding a bow. The Tartars are very ready and excellent archers on horseback, but on foot they are but slow. They are dexterous and ingenious in taking cities and castles, and are for the most part victorious over their enemies. Their manner of fight is very dangerous, so that in one conflict or skirmish, the Tartars, there are more slain and wounded than in any great battle over other nations, which happens by reason of their arrows, which they shoot strongly and surely out of their bows, being indeed so skillful in the art of shooting that they commonly pierce all kind of armor, and it happens to be routed, yet they fly in troops and bands so well ordered that it's very dangerous to follow or pursue them, because they shoot their arrows backwards in the flight, wounding or killing oftentimes both men and horses that pursue them. So when this Tartarian man, Chinggis Khan, had a vision of a white horse, and then they made him a king and put a crown on his head, certainly they are Tartarians who are mounted on horses with bows and arrow. It seems a pretty close match to Revelation 6 and the opening of the first seal. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. You shall rule over thy neighbors. So Chinggis Khan, being thus made emperor by common consent of all the Tartarians, determined that by anything he should make ordinances, and they should be observed by all. The first was that the Tartarians should believe and obey the immortal God, by whose will he was promoted to imperial dignity, which commandment they observed, and from thenceforth until this day they ever continued to call on the immortal God in all occasions. Secondly, the men should bear arms and should be numbered, and that every 10,000 should have a commander, and there's different ranks of the soldiers. And he rode against them which bordered next unto him, and he subdued them. So he conquered his neighbors, and he invaded diverse other nations, and conquered with great success, for he did all his exploits with a small troop of men, and was successful in his enterprises. Yet one day, accompanied by a small number, he encountered a great troop of his enemies, in such a sort that the fight begun between them, and he was valiantly defended himself, and his horse was slain under him. And the Tartarians, seeing that their lord was overthrown, betook themselves to flight, and they ran away. So the enemies, being all bruised in pursuing those that fled, and having no knowledge of the emperor whom they had unhorsed and overthrown, he run and hid himself among certain shrubs for the safety of his life. So this is Genghis Khan. He's got his horse shot out from under him. The other Tartarians fled, and he went and hid in the shrubs for the safety of his life. And when the enemies returned for the purpose to spoil the dead carcasses and to seek out any who were hidden, it happened that an owl came and sat upon the little trees or shrubs which he had chosen for his cover. And when they looked, they decided not to look anymore at this place because they assumed that because there was an owl sitting there, there must not be any man hidden beneath the bushes. So in the nighttime, he found a way to escape and took an off the path route back to his own people, and he told them what had befallen him. And for the Tartarians, they rendered thanks unto the immortal God, and the bird which under God was held by the means of the escape, they have ever since beheld it in such reverence amongst them, that happy is he who can get but a feather of an owl, for they wear it on their heads with great reverence, which I thought fit to set down in this book, that they cause might be known, for which the Tartarians use commonly to wear feathers on their heads. And the Emperor Genghis Khan is giving great thanks to God for his deliverance out of such a great danger of an army. So here is the second story for why the Tartarians revere the owl and have the owl on their flag. And it is because Genghis Khan escaped, and this owl supposedly sent by God to sit on the bushes that he was on, so that they did not, go into that bush and search for him and find him. Now, isn't it interesting that they wear a feather of the owl on their head? And it is common for the Tartarians to wear feathers on their heads. I think we can identify where the Native Americans got the feather wearing on their head. This is a Tartarian custom going back to 1200, Genghis Khan era. And once again, we know the Native Americans wear a feather or feathers on their head, which is a custom going back to the Tartarians and Emperor Genghis Khan. After the arrival of the Tartars, or the Indians, as they are now called. So here it's saying the Indians were once Tartarians. I believe that all Tartar tribes, like the former Americans, are the children of Israel. Now we must inquire from what Tartars the Americans are extracted. The Tartars, which about the year 1228, under the command of Genghis Khan, overspread the earth like a flood. They were successors of the 10 tribes of Israel, and they were carried into captivity by Assyria. The name Tartary, or rather Tartaria, seems to, by some testimony thereof, signify in the Syrian or Hebrew tongue remnants or remainders, because the Tartarians were remainders of the forementioned lost 10 tribes of Israel, and the northern Tartary herdsmen preserve to this day the names Dan, Zebulun, and Naphtali. Dan, Zebulun, and Naphtali, of course, are the names of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, and they can be found on various maps of Tartary. This one here, up in the northern part, we can see the tribe of Dan, the tribe of Naphtali, and it even speaks about the 10 tribes of Israel and Naphtali. So not only is this saying that the Tartars are the lost 10 tribes of Israel, it's also saying that the Tartars are where the Americans came from. And it wouldn't have taken much, of course, for the lost 10 tribes of Israel here in Azareth to cross the Bering Strait and come into North America and Canada. And Genghis Khan had another vision, a second vision, where he seen the same horseman armed in white armor, and appeared to him, saying, Genghis Khan, it is the pleasure of the immortal God that you should pass over the mountain Belgian and direct your course westwards, where thou should possess kingdoms and countries and subdue many nations. And you may be assured that with the words that I speak unto you, they are from the immortal God. Arise and go with your people to the Mount Belgian, to the part where it joins the sea. And they went forth until they came to the place where the great and deep sea did beat against the mountain, and it appeared that there was no passage for them. So the Tartarians are now heading to the west, and they came to a place, they come to some water, and they can't get past it. And presently Chinggis Khan, as he had been commanded by God, he prayed all night, and in the morning he saw that the sea was departed from the mountain, and had left them a way of 9 feet in breadth to pass. And they were all astonished exceedingly, and rendering thanks to the immortal God most devoutly, and passed on their way, basically going towards the west. And it sounds once again like the story of Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, where God has parted the water for them and allowed them to cross back to the west. Now, wasn't it in Fort Esdras when the 10 tribes of Israel were left out? They entered through a narrow passage in the Euphrates River because God worked a marvel for them, and he held back the source of the river so that they could pass over, and that they would dwell in Arzareth until the last time, until the end times, when they would come back again, and the Most High will hold back the source of the river so that they might be able to pass back to the west. They are beyond the Euphrates River, the flow of which God stopped in order to let them cross. And when God wills it, he will stop the flow of the river once again when it comes time for the 10 tribes to return. Is this not the 10 tribes of Israel? And are they not going once again to the west? And here we have an account that God has made a way for them 9 feet in breadth so they can pass through the water. And therefore are we not in the end times? Because the Tartarians dwelled in Arzareth until the last times, and now they've left. So that means that we are beyond the last times. So God parted the river or the lake, and they stepped toward the west. But as histories of the Tartarians do mention, after they passed over the mountains, they endured some hunger and thirst for certain days, because the land was a desert and the waters were bitter with salt, and they could not by any means drink it until at length they came to where they had all necessities abundantly. In a place they abode many days. Revelation 7:16, never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Is the Lamb at the center of the throne and their shepherd, Genghis Khan, someone who led them to springs of living water? Genghis Khan led them through the desert where there was nothing to drink and nothing to eat, to a place where they came where all necessities were abundant. And it happened that by the will of God that Chinggis Khan grew dangerously sick, and the physicians despaired of his recovery. And by this reason he called before him his 12 sons. Sounds like the 12 disciples. His 12 sons, he persuaded them to unite and concord, and he told each one of his sons to bring an arrow, and he bound them all together. And he asked the oldest one to break them, and he couldn't. So then he tried the next one, second one. He couldn't break it. The third one, none of them could break it. So then he commanded the youngest son to take some of the arrows individually out and break them, and which was easily accomplished. And Chinggis Khan said to his sons, in like manner, as long as you remain in concord and united, your empire shall continue. But as soon as there is division amongst you, your power is easily overthrown. And many other good examples were given by him and gathered by the Tartarians, which in their language they call Jasach, or the instructions of Chinggis Khan. And afterwards he caused the wisest and the best of his son, called Hochata Khan, to be received as his successor of the empire before he died. Then he rested in peace, and his son, called Hochata Khan, was placed in his seat. Now, there's a lot about Hochata Khan. That's coming in episode 2. One thing he did was he proceeded to the Iron Gate, which Alexander built at the foot of the Caucasus, and he raised it, lest it might hinder his return. So apparently the son of Genghis Khan found the gate which Alexander had built, and he destroyed it. And we'll learn about how these sons of Genghis Khan went on to spread the kingdom of Christianity and even take back the holy city, the kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, I'm sure this is just a phonetic coincidence, but Genghis Khan is the guy who sees the vision of the white horse, and he is chosen by God to be the leader of the 10 tribes of Israel, the Tartarians. Now, the word Khan is just another name for king. Genghis Khan is, Khan isn't his last name, it's a title. It's Genghis King is one way to say it. So if I just take his name, Genghis Khan, another way to write that is just, the way we would say it is King Genghis. Again, it's probably just a phonetic coincidence here, but King Genghis sounds awful close to King Jesus. King Genghis, King Jesus. That's very phonetically close. Like I said, this is probably just a coincidence, but Genghis Khan, or Khan Genghis, King Genghis, sounds very much like King Jesus. And they're speaking about Genghis Khan here, and the Caesar of Cathay, or the King of Cathay, that is the greatest prince, and not without reason, for in magnificent of courts, ample of dominion, abundance of treasure, number of soldiers, he goes far beyond all the kings of Asia. And he reigns in such majesty that his subjects call him the shadow of spirits and the son of the immortal God. Now, these Tartarians are baptized in the faith of the Christian, which they hold to this day. And there's a perpetual peace between Tartarians and Christians. These Tartarians are Christians. The Tartarian king made 7 petitions that he and all his people would be baptized in the Christian faith, that there would be perpetual peace and friendship established between the Christians and the Tartarians. Finally, that he would deliver free the Holy Land of our Lord and restore it to the Christians. So these Tartarians are certainly Christians, and they are calling Genghis Khan the son of the immortal God, the Son of God. Who is the Son of God? That is Jesus Christ. So according to these Christian people, their leader was Jesus Christ, the Son of the immortal God, the shadow of spirits, which may be the Holy Spirit. They called him the Holy Spirit, the Son of God. Now, I know it sounds quite crazy that thinking that Genghis Khan might be the second coming of Jesus Christ and liberating the lost 10 tribes of Israel back from Arzareth and restoring them to the Holy Land of Jerusalem. Was Genghis Khan, Khan Genghis, King Genghis, or perhaps King Jesus? Was his coming prophesied as the opening of the first seal, where he saw a white horse and a rider holding a bow who was given a crown, and he rode out and conquered and was bent on conquest? So this is just the beginning of the history of the Christian Tartarian Empire, and the first son of Genghis Khan is Hochata Khan, and we'll be covering him and further Christianity amongst the Tartarians, and more connections, of course, to the book of Revelation, which seems that the events of Revelation may have already come to pass, or at least a portion of them have already happened, and that when John is addressing the 7 churches in the province of Asia. He is definitely addressing the 7 churches, or perhaps the 7 empires in the province of Tartaria. And that the book of Revelation is a letter to them about their end times. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in episode 2.